Welcome to the NFL Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast, as always. And we are looking at NFL. It is week 14 in the NFL, everybody. So hold on to your hats because we are getting into the exciting part. And I cannot believe that we are in week 14 already. So we're going to be taking a look at our player props here that we have for you each and every week. So make sure to subscribe to that page and continue to follow along. Should plug that we also do have the NBA Coast to Coast podcast as well, where we're picking those player props and best bets for you every day of the week. So definitely want to continue to follow along on this YouTube channel as we move forward into the best part of the sports year, in my opinion. Nate, pretty good week. I did not do as well, nearly as well as the kid on the sweep. We got to talk about it. I'm ready to call you fully back, baby. Are you ready for week 14?
Not fully back, but it's definitely good to go 5-0 over Thanksgiving and Sunday. And Josh had done nearly I think sweep or 3-1, 2-1 the previous 2 weeks. So
yeah.
Feel pretty good about these picks, though. I'm going to start off on Sunday night at the end of the week once again. Isaiah Pacheco. Maybe time to take the reins off a little bit here. I mean, he could have played in week 12, played limited in week 13. And right now we're at 53.5 rush yards at MGM. I saw it as low as 51.5. I don't know where it's going to sit, but also really like first quarter for this guy. The tone setter for the Chiefs is only 10.5 rushing yards at FanDuel. I'll probably put a sprinkle on that as well. But I mean, he's just such a difference maker for this offense in terms of his ferocity running the ball. Chiefs also might get DJ Humphries back, which would be huge for their line. They've really struggled to run the ball lately. Kareem Hunt kind of fallen off a cliff. He's averaging 44 yards per game at 3.5 yards per carry in his last 4. And yeah, he whatever Pacheco has in terms of explosiveness, Hunt doesn't have. I mean, he's just a tough runner who will get you 3-4 and fall forward. So, I mean, we saw them split it pretty evenly in Pacheco's return. Kind of a surprisingly low rush play rate against that Raiders defense that always comes to play against the Chiefs. But Pacheco only got 7 carries on 38% of snaps, and he goes for 44 against that in that matchup. 6.3 yards per carry. He's a dude who, when he was healthy, the first 2 this year with no Hunt in the equation, sure, but 95 scrimmage yards per game on 21 opportunities, attempts plus targets. The books have set his rush attempts at 12.5 after he got 7. So clearly we're expecting almost double the workload here on extra rest. Chiefs played Friday facing a Chargers team on shorter rest and a Chargers team that's had a really rough schedule in terms of travel lately. They're also a defense that will let you pound the rock, right? They're the classic bend but don't break. We're going to let you get into the red zone, and then we're going to keep you out. We're going to hold you. We're going to play that field goal game. So they allow 4.6 yards per carry, bottom 10. They've allowed the 7th most explosive run plays and the 7th highest first down percentage allowed via the rush. So, I mean, in that first matchup when Hunt had, he only got actually 48% of the snap rate because that was his first game for the Chiefs. He went for 85 scrimmage yards on 17 opportunities. So I think Pacheco's looking at a similar amount of opportunities. I think he's a much more explosive player. And the Chiefs are definitely going to try to ramp him up while phasing Hunt out here as we head towards the playoffs.
Makes sense. They've been waiting for this, right? Kareem Hunt was the perfect handcuff. He was the perfect just sort of temporary replacement for Pacheco. He's a guy that they just got to bring in, already knew the personnel and everything. So that was beautiful, but it wasn't meant for the season. I think this team has known that it's really just biding its time to get to the end of the season. But they do need to get this man going before they get there, to your point. And it's just going to continue to ramp up. This is a good week. I think we're on the right trajectory here for him to take over those duties, because it's going to come down to usage more than anything at this point. If you believe in that moving forward, then I think that this is a good point in time to take him. I get to take Jameis Winston. So I know we both like him. And I appreciate you sort of selflessly letting me talk about him, because the horses are preparing for battle for this one. They were ready for battle last game, but not quite as much. So we'll see what he comes with this week. But I think 251 passing yards is a good over for the gunslinger. I mean, look, he's averaging 336 in 5 starts this season, 43 and a half attempts for the man. And I do think I think we can all agree that like Nick Chubb is a 2025 play at this point. I don't know that the run game is going to come back into our lives for Cleveland until number 24 on Cleveland is back to his old self. And there's no way you can claim that he is as of right now. So this number includes the Pittsburgh Blizzard game. That was absolutely bonkers that man was still throwing downfield in that game with just 27 attempts, Nate, in that one, which was interesting. They did try to get Chubb involved, but obviously that was a tough game against the Pittsburgh D there. But the thing that we both like to talk about too is the pick sixes. When you have Jameis Winston as a quarterback that you're taking an over, or he's your fantasy starter, if he's going to throw a pick, might as well, take Jameis, because it might be going back to the house, as we know, which is only going to make him need to pass even more. The Steelers are going to continue to face a very high pass play rate, right, against them. You can't really run against this team nearly as well as you are able to get some of those passes off into the deep secondary. They are up to 70% of the yards that they are allowing in their last 3 games are via the pass. So they are definitely, and they're played in some higher scoring games, right? Like Russ is out there doing his thing a lot more, obviously, now that he's got 2 receivers on the outside that he trusts, and Calvin Austin looks good. But yeah, I think we're looking at some possibilities for the pick six and some high scoring is really what we're looking at too. I think the Browns will continue to play in those higher scoring games. They have been pretty susceptible to the pass, as we saw Bo Nix go off on them last week. So for the Jerry Jeudy stuff, like everybody knows how good Jerry Jeudy is right now. We had him last week. Probably should have taken the yards as well, but the receptions was a lock at the half, as we know. 15% of Jerry Jeudy's career yardage total has come in the last 5 games with Jameis Winston. Let that sink in. This is his 5th season in the league, and in 5 games he has 15% of his yards because famous Jameis is finding him. And I love this duo right now. So yeah, let's keep riding the famous Jameis train. There's a even potential for a ladder to 300 yards. I'm not going to lie to you in this one.
Sure. I mean, if the Steelers play a similar game as they did last week, just complete shootout, we could definitely have that kind of game. And look, Jameis, yeah, 3rd in air yards per attempt, 3rd fastest pace of play when he's under there, 4th in deep ball completion percentage. It's just a production premium when he goes down the field. Might get Cedric Tillman back as well. So now they have 3 good receivers. They have Njoku as a red zone weapon. And they have no run game, which is what you love when you take a quarterback who's going to have to throw at any early and often, and he's just not afraid to throw. You love that as a fantasy play. Like, I know it might be kind of fishing to stack Winston and Jeudy in DFS, but I'm probably going to be doing it in some lineups anyway, because damn if the volume isn't going to be there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to fade Chuba Hubbard, though. 75.5 rush plus receiving yards. I think you can still find at MGM. It's on the move down, because another guy who's going to kind of get phased out here as the season progresses. With Jonathan Brooks back for 2 games, he barely played at all in his debut. The Rook up to 21% snap rate in the second game back. I would expect over 30% here against the Eagles, especially if this game goes according to handicap, which is Eagles -13, which is Eagles facing maybe the worst rush defense in the league. I know they've been better lately, the Panthers, but not, you ain't played this type of offense. Like, Saquon is set for 113 rushing yards on the prop. So, I mean, how much are the Panthers going to be able to have the ball if they can't stop at all? That's going to be a problem. You're definitely looking at negative game script, where then you're going to be forced to be a receiver if you're Chuba. He had 0 targets on his 22 routes last week against a bad Bucs defense. He only caught 1 of 5 targets the previous week, so not a huge threat in the receiving game. Under in workhorse role when they had negative game script, the Panthers at Washington and at Denver, and really only went over this once against your New York Giants overseas in just a pathetic effort. Just an absolute ridiculously bad game from a Giants team that has their fair claim to worst rush defense in the league. If you had added the receiving yards, he would have gone under this against the Saints as well, bottom 5 run defense. But this Eagles defense is not playing. Like, they are second in DVOA during this win streak. I don't know if there'll be a little bit of a let up here. It doesn't seem like it'll be on the defensive side of the ball, though. Like, under Fangs, they are just not giving up anything. Like, there are no explosive plays. To hold the Baltimore Ravens and Derrick Henry to what they just did last week, let down spot be damned. Like, this is just a much easier task. And add the fact that Chuba fumbled, kind of cost them the game last week. I'm not saying they're going to bench him by any means. I think he has generated too much respect for this team. But he's a veteran with almost 200 carries on the year. Like we can lower your workload a little bit here, maybe save you for next year as we try to build something for the Panthers.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's a little bit confusing to me. Is just like you signed Chuba, so why did you sign Chuba? Like, if Brooks is the guy, then why did you sign him? But this season is a lost cause. You got to get Brooks in there. I don't know if either guy is going over on their rushing alone. So like, yeah, for Chuba, I love Chuba. This is one of those situations where I'm just like, am I the only one here that just thinks that you should have drafted a freaking running back to this team the way that they did last year? But they did, and like you said, Jonathan Brooks, we saw him finally getting involved beyond just the pass game, which was sort of how he started out his comeback from injury. Was, well, we're going to get him involved in third down situations and So at the very least, you can probably rely on Chuba's receiving going under, and that's a nice addition to the overall prop here. Obviously, if this thing gets out of control, then maybe Chuba's catching more passes, but at that point, I don't think either of us think he's on the field for the end of that game. So yeah, I think this is a good moment in time to even potentially take some passing or receiving stuff for Jonathan Brooks, which is heavily correlated to just Chuba going under everywhere. But let's talk about Evan Ingram, the former Giant, as you trashed my Giants' run defense a minute ago. And I would say the Saints' run defense is worse, but we are definitely splitting hairs here about who's worse. Let's talk about Ingram, though, in this divisional matchup. He's going to have Mac Jones out there again. That was brutal. I was so annoyed about that hit on Trevor Lawrence. I'm not a Trevor Lawrence fan, but that was so unnecessary by Shire. So, like, glad that he's getting the suspension. But that brings us back to Mac Jones being in there. And as much as we talk about Trevor Lawrence targeting Evan Ingram, Mac Jones going to love his tight ends, as you well know as a Pats fan. In 3 starts with Mac, 18 of his 24 targets he's caught, and they were all against really good defenses against tight ends as well. I mean, Minnesota might be the one sort of caveat, but went over versus them. An under versus Detroit in that ridiculous blowout, where versus maybe the worst team in the league versus probably the best team in the league. So we'll give him a little bit of a pass for still getting 5 in that game. And if you look at the times that he's going over in 7 of the 9, it's been they're playing comeback, right? You look at them versus Houston. He caught 7 of 9, and that's going to be a situation I think is happening again, right? In this one is that they're going to need to be coming back once again against this squad. And he actually leads tight ends in target rate. He's just not always out there running the routes, but because he's getting targeted so much, it's not as big of a deal that his route participation has been down. I would also say, like, he hasn't been fully healthy for pretty much the entire season, and does look to be on the upward trend for that. He's only 15th among tight ends in the routes run, but like we said, the highest target rate. So you just sort of average that out to being an above average sort of volume for him and the usage that he's going to see. And I'm not really sure who's going to be running the ball for the Jags, but like, how well are they going to do it? What a fall from off of a cliff for Etienne, as we know. And then, yeah, Tank Bigsby hasn't been able to stay consistent or healthy either. And we know how good this rush defense is for the Titans. So this short yardage stuff is going to be crucial to get involved, get Evan Ingram involved. You also have Christian Kirk not out in there for this game anymore and for the season, as we know. So yeah, there's going to be lots of stuff in the middle of the field for this dude. And I think it's going to be a much more competitive game for him, but not competitive anywhere else.
Yeah. And did you say you're taking the receptions rather than the yards, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I specified that, but I think, the reception's 5.5. You still get plus money for that.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Which
Thanks
is
for bringing that
nice
back.
plus money. I mean, because he's right on the cusp of that every game. So they're saying that, do you think they'll be chasing points against the Titans? You said, well, we think they will. I mean, you could just say in perpetuity, the Jaguars will be chasing points. It's very unlikely they will be holding a lead for much or be able to run the ball with any success against the Titans D. Yeah, that just shut down Joe frickin' Mixon and is going to get up in terms of physicality for a division game. We do know that they can do that. And then force Mac Jones to try beat them with a bunch of short passes to Ingram, hopefully. Speaking of testy matchups, we got the Kirk Cousins revenge game in Minnesota. And I'm going to take a Vikings receiver, though. I'm going to take Jordan Addison over 47.5 receiving yards. Look, I mean, I'm not touching this Falcons offense. I do not think Kirk Cousins is going to have success. I don't care about the revenge narrative. I think the Vikings, their defensive approach should be all over him. Maybe he leads to more picks, but in any case, it's going to lead to more possession for the Vikes at home here. And AJ Terrell is probably going to be shadowing Jetta, right, most of this game, which is lovely. We used that approach when they were playing the Bears a couple weeks ago and said, I was like, I'm going to fade Jefferson, small units on that because it's too scary. But we took TJ Hawkinson. He went off. And Addison also actually went off even more
in that
so.
game too. Yeah.
Yeah, huge spike game. And Atlanta's actually fifth in limiting receptions to tight ends, so maybe less for Hawkinson as
Hmm.
well. Addison in his last three now, 102 air yards per game, 92 actual yards, 98% route rates the last two. So very much involved. And, I guess the Falcons might get Mike Hughes back as their secondary corner. He's 106th in man coverage this year, or you get second year man Clark Phillips. Him and the slot corner D. Alford could not contain Lad McConkey at all, who had 113 of the 140 passing yards for the Chargers last week.
That was crazy.
Vikings can throw a lot more though. And you could throw all over this Falcons D wherever AJ Terrell is not. They've allowed fifth highest yards per attempt. They've allowed 73% of their yards via pass in this 3-game slump. And a lot of that has to do with just how bad the offense has been. Like their third worst time. Actually, they have the third best time of possession. I was shocked to see this, despite Kirk throwing 0 touchdowns and 6
They're
interceptions.
slow. They play so slow. Yeah.
Yeah, they play slow, but on the defensive side, allowing the highest QBR in that span. Bo Nix shred them. Herbert one receiver, but he was comfortable back there. We know there's no pass rush for the Falcons, so give me Addison to go down the field.
Yeah, I see what you're seeing. I like the sort of surge for Addison right now. I also like Darnell Mooney. I don't really like Kirk Cousins either, but I still think Darnell Mooney is going to get more involved. I'm more just like the number. It's at about 49.5 receiving yards for Mooney. I think he's due for a big uptick. I wasn't even going to mention him, but since we're in this game anyway, that was one of my strong leans, was sort of a bounce back for him. He's had 2 bad games in a row. I do think that this Falcons team is going to be losing in this game, as we see the Vikings leading for so much of the season. The Falcons not quite as much, other than when they seem to get these random special teams or defensive touchdowns that they've had a couple of this season. So yeah, I think Addison is a good look here. And yeah, for Jay Jetta, against a man defense, when you can bank a little bit more on him getting shadowed, right, and not just staying, not having the zone defense keep guys on one side of the field. So like both those. And for the last pick for us for the show, Nate, I mean, tell me what you think, but I'm going with Will Levis, baby. This is a nice spot for Will Levis against the Jags. Look, every week I would be lying if I said one of the first things I do when I'm looking at NFL is not just go right to who is the quarterback and or receivers playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's just get them. Maybe we get them for some first half numbers and stuff like that too. But either way, I just think you're good to get over to. I put this at 210 plus for Will Levis. There's a little bit of discrepancy between his passing numbers right now. But I really just wanted to be able to say, do you know that he's in the top 10 in most important passing categories in the last 4 games? Had that big dud and then came back out and looked a lot better. But yeah, it was bad against Washington. And that was really the only one in this last 4 that made him look that way. I thought he was going to have a better game that day. But either way, he is in the top 10 in yards per game, 261 over the last 4 with 8.5 yards per attempt. That is also in the top 10. Then he's 8th in TDs, 6th in passer rating, and 2nd in yards per attempt. And that's what's really big here too, is he's gotten Nick Westbrook-Akine involved, not just a touchdown threat, although I think half of his receptions this year are touchdowns. It's still long receptions for him either way. Chig only a little bit involved last week from the tight end spot, but then Calvin Ridley also appears back enough for us to be good. Okay, Nuke got out of there. And in the last 4 weeks since Nuke's been out of there, we've seen Calvin Ridley emerge a ton. And we're going to see this already terrible defense without Tyson Campbell, their top corner as well. Looks like he's going to be out. He's trending towards not playing. Let's put it that way. He's very, very limited in practice. So you've got, I think Calvin Ridley, I think that was something you mentioned to me as well as a potential play. I think he's a good look as well to get about 60 plus receiving yards in this one for Ridley. He's been the deep threat as well. This Jags team giving in the bottom 3 in terms of most 20-yard pass completions allowed. So I think Will's probably going to get, his 200 yards on a good amount of them on 3 completions that I would imagine that he's able to make this week. So I think there's some alternate lines. I think you can take him for over 1.5 touchdowns. I think this should be about 229.5. I think he's going to be good for about 230 if you look at the way that they've unleashed him in the last 5 weeks or so.
Yeah. No, not bottom 3, bottom 1. Jaguars give up the most explosive pass plays of any team. They give up the most fantasy points to passers. Any way you want to slice it. And if Tyson Campbell's out, their splits are even worse. They have nothing resembling a good corner out there. So yeah, I'm fine. I'll sell off. I'll sign off on it. Bill Levi's and all, but I got one more play. It's a
Yeah.
bonus play because Malik Neighbors was suddenly a scratch here on Friday practice with a
Yeah.
groin injury. And normally, if it was a competitive team, you'd be like, all right, he's probably going to go out there and give it a go. But like the Giants are maybe looking for the number one pick, and they might sit their best offensive weapon just to make sure that they're going to lose this game. But if he's out there, I'm fine with 7 receptions because if he's playing, he's still the squeaky wheel. He's still complaining about how you're already treating me with this ridiculous rotation of quarterbacks, a last minute start for Drew Lock against the Cowboys. So you didn't even get to work with him and know who he's playing with. He still got 8 of 13 targets in that game. Like, he's going to get fed the ball as long as he's out there. He leads all receivers in target share, has dropped the fewest percentage of passes as well. Just absolutely elite. And the Saints team tied fourth most 40 plus, 20 plus yard passes and tied most 40 plus yard passes. They give up huge plays. Their secondary is ravaged by injuries. So we're looking at like third string corners at this point. I'll just say, like, I'm going to throw him in some tournament lineups for sure, thinking that there's a wide range of outcomes where he just goes off for one of those games we saw early in the season, 100 plus, 2 touchdowns. Because Drew Lock is not bad. Like, as long as it's not Tommy DeVito, I'm not saying Drew Lock is great, but he's certainly an upgrade there. And he's had 10 days to prep now, if actually knowing he's going to start,
Right.
and Neighbors knowing he's working with him.
That's what this is, right? Poor Drew Lock was just thrown into it minutes before they play last week as well. Yeah, there's a lot more to like in this one now. And against defense, look, I mean, the Cowboys aren't a good defense, but Drew Lock, like you said, just didn't even have time to prepare. He's had 10 days now. They've got the rest advantage. Like, this is, I'm scared that they're going to win because I want that draft pick. So yeah, I don't know that this is, I think this is going to be decently close. And I think a lot of it's going to be coming through the air. I mean, if Malik is not in, is there anybody else? Theo Johnson is also out now for the Giants. So it's like, is it just a Wandale Robinson type of game? Like, who is Drew Lock thrown to? It's not Neighbors.
No, I will fire this game into the sun and never watch it.
Catapulted into the atmosphere. All right, that's all we got for NFL for week 14. Definitely make sure to subscribe to that page. Also got the NBA Play of Props up every day for you guys, so you want to make sure that you don't miss any of those. Until we see you next, happy betting.